Okay. So we'll give it a couple minutes. It is also recording as well. So this will be available on demand for attendees in the future if they want to share the link with others at their company.
Okay, great.
Let's give it just a couple more minutes to get people logged in here, and then we'll get started.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll do a quick little introduction, and for all the attendees, you are in listen-only mode, but we are happy to take any questions either via chat, or you can also raise your hand using Zoom. So look out for those buttons on the toolbar menu. For TAG's webinar this week, we are teaming up with Core Associates, and Leanne brings many years, 20 years of account management and sales experience in the construction industry in the software sector. So we're happy to have her present a little bit about the TimberScan product for our 300 CRE users. So with that being said, I will go ahead and hand it off to Leanne. She will be pausing periodically. So again, if you have questions that come up, just let us know and we will unmute your microphone and allow you to ask your questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Leilani. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining the webinar here this afternoon. The focus of today's session is to introduce all of you to TimberScan, which is the industry-leading accounts payable automation software developed by us here at Core Associates. Okay. My objective over this next hour is to show you all how capturing information and documents electronically and then using automated workflows in our software will save your company a tremendous amount of time and really give you the visibility and control that's impossible to achieve in a manual environment. I want to share some background on the evolution of TimberScan and Core Associates. When we developed the software many years ago, our focus was around accounts payable automation because that was the biggest pain point at that time. But we've since evolved into a complete enterprise content management system. So you can think of TimberScan really as a central repository to manage all of the documents for your company. And our vision and our goal was to be able to use and leverage technology to help companies like yours be more productive, more efficient, and really drive profitability. And that's still our focus today. So some of the main goals with TimberScan, one was to create a paper-free environment for companies and really bring you into the electronic world. We wanted to enable process automation. Okay? We talk to companies all the time that are still passing paper folders around the office for their approvals. So by automating, you can reduce your invoice cycle times as well as your processing costs. Eliminate frustration with finding and dealing with lost documents. With TimberScan, there'll be no more having to dig through filing cabinets. Information will be available to you at your fingertips. Provide transparency and visibility, so making sure you know where invoices are in the approval process. Right? Reduce your data entry time as well as errors, and just provide quick and easy access to the documents and information that you need in order to make informed business decisions. Okay, so these are some of the drivers of TimberScan, and I'll be focusing on these key areas as I go through the presentation here this afternoon. Some key distinctions about TimberScan. Okay, in addition to being an electronic routing and approval system for accounts payable and all of their documents within your company, TimberScan is a collaboration tool. It provides an audit trail, as well as visibility into financial information about your jobs and your properties. Okay. It's proven technology. It was developed in 2004, and it's currently used by roughly 2,000 companies and 30,000 users worldwide. And because TimberScan's been around for 15 years, the product's been built upon many years of direct input and feedback from our customers. Okay, and these are companies similar to your businesses: construction companies, specialty contractors, property development and real estate management companies. And that direct input's really shaped our product and influenced the design of our software. We're also the only AP routing and approval system designed exclusively for Sage 300 CRA. Okay? That's an important consideration when you're looking at solutions, and I think you'll see that in the depth of the integration once we get into the software here in a few minutes. Our approach was really to try to replicate the Sage AP user experience as much as possible within our system, so you can think of TimberScan really as an extension to your Sage software. Beyond TimberScan, we've created Core Cloud Systems, or CCS as we call it, and that's our electronic mobile e-form solution. And it further extends the concept of your paper-free office into the field, and then that also integrates with TimberScan and Sage. Right? We have solutions for field time capture, credit card and expense capture and reconciliation, as well as field purchasing and receiving. And then you can also create your own custom forms using our eForms wizard. Now, at a high level, the workflow process for CCS, regardless of which solution you are using, looks like this. So if we look over here on the left, this is an example of the credit card application. But the idea is you can capture information using these mobile e-forms from anywhere on any device, and you can access your Sage data tables. Okay, so you can actually embed lookup fields into the mobile form, and then have validation when you're doing your data entry. So things like jobs, cost codes, and employees. Right. Now, once the information on the form has been completed, it goes into Core Cloud Systems. Okay, this is a web-based application, and it goes into an approval grid, so you can have approvals based on your workflow processes. Okay, and then the forms and any data that's been captured or documents such as photos or receipts, those get stored within CCS, and then they can also be stored within TimberScan. Okay, now in the example of the credit card solution, there's also a reconciliation process that takes place within the system. So the credit card statement that you receive from the credit card company gets uploaded and then reconciled against the transactions that were completed by the cardholders. Okay, so if anything is missing, you can ping the cardholders right from within CCS. Now, once your transactions have been approved, they can be sent to TimberScan or Sage electronically, so there's no rekeying of data required. And in the example of the purchase order and receiving tickets that I mentioned, they can be sent to TimberScan as well and be available as supporting documents. So when your invoices come into TimberScan, you could attach those to the invoices. Right. So the design of Core Cloud Systems is really to provide seamless single entry data capture from the field right through to the back office. Okay. I'm not going to show Core Cloud Systems today, but I just did want to make you aware of our capabilities in this area. CCS is really the next step in creating your complete electronic environment. Okay. If you decide you want to take a closer look at Core Cloud Systems, just let TAG know, or you can always reach out to us at Core Associates as well, and we'd be happy to set up a demonstration for you. Okay, last slide before we get into the software. It just lays the groundwork for the AP routing and approval workflow process and provides a nice illustration so you know what to expect if you're going to use the TimberScan software. Right. So if we look up here in the upper left-hand corner, we'll start from the time an invoice would arrive at your door. And the first step in the process is acquiring documents into the system. So there's a few ways to do that. For invoices that you have coming in hard copy in the mail, you would just take those and scan them in using a network copier or scanner. For invoices that are coming in via email, if they're coming in individually, you can always drag and drop them from your email. If you have a centralized inbox set up for AP, we have an email monitoring tool that you can use, and it'll look to that inbox all day long. So as emails are coming in, we can automatically grab the attachments from those emails and then move those to a network file folder that you specify. And then TimberScan connects to that folder, and we can bring all of those invoices in automatically into the system for you. Right. We also have OCR technology, or optical character recognition. And what that allows us to do, as invoices are scanned into TimberScan, we can read the text on those images and then translate that text and automatically populate the data entry for you. Okay. So the OCR can be a really nice time-saving tool. You do have to set up vendors or templates for your vendors, but that's very easy to do, and I'll show you an example of that here in just a few moments as well. Right. From the data entry standpoint, a couple of key things I want to point out here. One is that your data entry would no longer be done within Sage 300. It would be done within TimberScan. But we've replicated your data entry grid from Sage. So from a training and an implementation standpoint, it's very easy for users to get up to speed because they're already familiar with the user interface. Okay. We also link to your Sage data tables. So from within TimberScan, we can access your jobs, your cost codes, your GL accounts, your vendors, right? And as you're entering information into TimberScan and doing your data entry, as soon as the system has enough information to know what to do with that invoice, we'll automatically route it out for approval, and then we send the approvers an email letting him or her know that they have invoices for approval. Okay. Now those approvals or those routing rules are based on your business rules. So you define them, and then we would help you set them up as part of the implementation process. The other thing in relation to approvers is users no longer have to be in the office to do their approvers. We have something called TimberScan Go, which is an extension of TimberScan, and that allows approvers to do their approvals remotely using either a tablet or a smartphone. When the approval process has been completed, we do have this fourth step, this final review. Now this is an optional step, you don't have to use it, but a lot of companies do. And it's really just an opportunity to have a final set of eyes on it, make sure that all the coding has been completed, nothing's been missed or left off. If you have any supporting documentation requirements, to make sure those have been fulfilled as well. So as you go through this approval process, you can collect a packet of information along the way. So at any point, you can attach supporting documents to that invoice. So whether it be a purchase order or a receiving ticket, maybe it's an insurance certificate, you can attach that as you go through the process, and then the end result is a packet of information that when you send the invoices over to Sage, that entire packet of information goes with it and is then available via the paperclip option. Okay, and that includes the check as well. So we have a process within TimberScan. Once you approve the invoices and you pay them within Sage, you can attach a copy of that check image as well, and that becomes part of that entire packet of information. Right. So one of the nice benefits about TimberScan is that the accounting group has full visibility to everything, who has what, the total dollars, how long they've had it, and then your operations or your field users, they can run reports that include not only what's been posted in Sage, but they also have access to what's still in the approval process within TimberScan. So if you have to do cost inquiries for your jobs or your properties, they can get that full picture view using TimberScan. Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and go into the application here. I will make this full screen here in a few minutes, but I want to show you, I'm just going to simulate dual screens here, and then I'll blow this up here in a few minutes. Now this is the main TimberScan application, and all I did to access this was I clicked on an icon on my desktop, and then based on my login credentials that I enter will dictate which features and functionality I have available to me within TimberScan. Okay. But you can see the system has, nice big bright buttons, very user-friendly, very easy to navigate. I have this dashboard view here as well. This is optional and it's configurable by user. So if I look over here, these are all the widgets or the tiles that I have available to me, and then I can pick and choose which ones I want in my view here. The idea with the dashboard is to just give you a quick bird's eye view on any invoices that might need your attention. Make sure you're able to take advantages of your discounts if you want to look at invoices by vendor, by payment date. Just a nice, quick, easy tool to be able to do that. Across the top here, I have my function buttons. And then on the bottom, I have my action buttons. So as I navigate across the top, you'll see these action buttons underneath change. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hide the dashboard. So the first step is acquiring documents. So to do that, I just click this Acquire Images button. And I'm going to use this as an example. So these are some invoices that I received via email. So I can just drag and drop these right from my inbox into TimberScan. Okay. Now, if I was using the centralized AP inbox, to connect to that, all I would do here is, as my image source, I would select File, and then I need to tell the system what I'm acquiring. In this case, it's invoices. I do need to assign a data entry group. In this database, I just have one set up here, but you could have multiple if you had different companies or locations and multiple people doing data entry. You could have as many as you wanted set up here. And then I would just hit this Open File button, and this allows me to browse out to my network. So I could access whatever file folder I designated to connect to that email monitoring tool. I would browse out, and then I could either select all of my invoices, or I could just pick and choose which ones I wanted to bring into the system. I'd highlight them, hit Open, and then that's going to automatically bring those invoices into TimberScan for me. Okay. Now across the top, I have my function buttons available here. I have some control buttons on the side, and then I have some additional buttons.
We are seeing the PowerPoint presentation. We are not seeing the dashboard.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute, let me do. Are you seeing it now?
Nope, still seeing the PowerPoint, just the kind of like minimized version.
Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, how's that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Let me back up here then, since you didn't see that here. Are you still able to see my screen okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, so let me just show you that again here real quick. So this is the main menu of TimberScan. This was the dashboard here that I was mentioning, that this is optional and it's configurable by user. These are my main buttons up here, and then I have my action buttons here underneath. So to acquire documents, I just hit this Acquire button. And then I can drag and drop invoices right from my email inbox. Okay. And if I needed to, like I said, if I was using that email monitoring, I would go ahead, select invoices. My image source needs to be file here. I would note my data entry group, and then I would hit Open File. And that's what allows me to browse out to my network drive. Then I can pick and choose what I want to bring in, hit Open, and then that will automatically bring any invoices in here that I've highlighted. All right. So the two main things that I'm doing at this phase of the acquire process is I'm sorting and ordering my pages, and I'm doing some quality control on the documents. Okay. So here I could use this button down here to make my image larger or smaller, but I can also use the wheel of my mouse, which is what I'm doing here. I have my control buttons over here and some function buttons on the top. Now the system will try to do some sorting and separating for me. In this example, the first document PDF that I brought in was a 2-page PDF, so the system interpreted that as a 2-page invoice. But if I click on this, okay, I see invoice 393, and then I see invoice 394. So this is 2 separate invoices. All I need to do to make this 2 separate documents, I can highlight it and either say mark as a new invoice, or I can right click and say insert page break above. Okay. Down here, this is a separate invoice. So I've sorted and ordered my pages. Over here, I can put some annotations on there. So I can put a sticky note, and then I can type text in here as well. I can highlight, and then I could do some free form text. So if I just want to put some notes on here, I can go ahead and do that. But once I'm happy that my pages have been sorted and ordered, the quality looks good. If something was scanned in crooked or skewed or maybe was a little fuzzy, I can rotate the document, I can despeckle it, and that using these buttons over here. But once I'm happy with everything, I would just go ahead and hit process, and that's going to take this batch of invoices and move it to the data entry group that I've specified down here. Okay. Now, if I'm bringing invoices in using the optical character recognition software, the OCR, instead of using this acquire button here, I would just use the acquire capture invoices. And what that does, it just tells the system, as I'm bringing these documents into the system, compare it to any templates that I have on file. And if I find any matches, that will go ahead and do my data entry for me based on the templates that I've set up. Okay. So if we go ahead and look at a template, these are the ones that I have set up here in my database. I'll go ahead and look at H&D Supply. And all I'm doing here is telling the system, when I receive an invoice from H&D Supply, where to look on this document to find key pieces of information. And I can highlight any of these pieces of information across the top. So invoice number, invoice date, balance due, description, job, commitment. If I was setting this up for the first time, okay, the first thing I need to do is define an anchor. And the anchor is the piece of information that's unique to H&D Supply that will tell the system where the invoice is coming from. Now, typically, the company name is what's used. You could have multiple anchors. You could have phone numbers or addresses, but normally most companies will just use the company name, and that seems to work just fine. I'll come back to identifier here in a minute, but if we look at the invoice number, if I was setting this template up brand new for the first time, my highlighter would be here in the center of the page, and I would just drag and drop the highlighter over the piece of information that I'm identifying. And then over here on the left, this results panel, this tells me how the system interpreted what I highlighted. Okay, so in this example, everything looks okay. So I can move on to my invoice date. Same thing, highlighter in the center of the page. I'm going to drag and drop over that piece of information. Everything looks okay on my results panel. For the balance due, in this example, my balance is on the first page down here. But we do support multi-page templates as well. So if you had multiple pages and maybe your balance would be on a second page, we can support that. You could highlight a description. In this case, I've highlighted this description here, but it could be anything on the invoice. If you have the job number typically on your invoice, you could highlight the job as well. If not, you can skip it. Same thing with the commitment. If the vendor typically puts that on there, you could use this and highlight it. Once I'm done, I would hit review, and then everything that I've highlighted would be in this results panel here. Now, I could also use this identifier. In this case, this account job number was highlighted, but I could use this to help with the invoice coding. Okay? So if I look at this, at a minimum, I can tell the system what the vendor number is. So the name is H&D Supply, but over here I can map that to my vendor in Sage. So this is a lookup into my vendor file within Sage. So I would just pick my H&D Supply within Sage, and then every time I get an invoice from H&D Supply Company, the vendor number will automatically default as well, in addition to these other pieces of information that I've highlighted. So these pieces, invoice date, balance, that's really, I'll say, your header level information. This allows you to do some default coding at the line item level as well. So if we take things, reoccurring invoices is a good example, maybe phone bills or utility bills. If you're using a certain vendor, maybe on only one project or specific project, you could tell the system every time I get an invoice from this vendor, I want it to default to a specific job and a cost code. If it's a utility bill and there's maybe a meter number on here, you could use the identifier to be the meter number and say every time I get an invoice from this vendor that has this identifier on it, I want it to be coded to a certain GL expense prefix account. Okay, or phone number, maybe it would go to or maybe that phone belongs to, say, a project manager or something, and you could have it automatically default to a specific job or a cost code. Okay. So this is really, like I said, meant to be a time-saving tool. Depending on the volume of invoices you're doing on a weekly or monthly basis, this can really drastically cut down on the data entry that you're doing. Okay. I'm just going to pause there for a minute to see if there's any questions at this point before I go into the data entry. Okay. All right, so I can move on to my invoice entry. The system's telling me I have 10 primary invoices to be entered, so I'm just going to click on that. Now I have my function buttons across the top again, control buttons on the side and on the bottom. So look and feel is very similar, okay? Very easy to navigate. I can also use the wheel of my mouse again here in this screen as well. Down here at the bottom, this is my data entry grid. And I just want to point out, this is what I have here in my demo environment, but this would exactly mirror what you have in your Sage system. So if you are using different data entry grids based on vendor type and that, those would also appear here in TimberScan as well. I can dislodge this data entry grid here. So in a lot of cases, in a lot of cases, we would have maybe dual monitors set up where you would have your invoice on one screen and then you would have your data entry done on a second screen. So you could drag and drop this data entry grid. That's not going to cooperate. There we go. You could drag and drop this to a second screen or a second monitor. You could also simulate dual entry on one screen. I'm just going to go ahead and put this back here for the purposes of the demo. So I can go ahead and just start doing my data entry here. If I know the vendor number, I could go ahead and type that in. If I don't, I can use this list button, or I could use my function keys within Sage as well. Those will also work here within TimberScan. I can do a lookup based on vendor number, vendor name, or address. Okay, the address is something we actually added. So this is just another data point that you have available to you to make sure that you're picking the correct vendor. If I start typing, it's going to narrow down my search results for me. Now you'll notice when I selected my vendor, I get the compliance warning here within TimberScan. If you're using compliance tracking in Sage, you will get those warnings here as well. Then I can just go ahead and start entering my invoice number. Okay. So you'll see I got this duplicate invoice warning message. So this is just an example of the depth of the integration with Sage. As soon as I entered the number, I'm immediately alerted that there's a duplicate on file. Okay. So it's what we call data entry point validation. So I don't have to wait until I've entered 10 line items in, go to hit save or accept, and then have the system tell me there's a problem. I know immediately when I enter that piece of information. If I don't recall that invoice and I want to do a little bit further investigation to get more history on that, right from within this screen, I can hit my history button. And this is going to show me all invoices for this particular vendor. Now, in my system, I just have one page of invoices for this vendor, but real world, you might have multiple pages. You can sort and search on any of these columns. You could just start typing in the invoice number here, and that's going to bring you to that particular invoice. In this example, I know what the invoice is. So if I scroll over, if I click this details button, this tells me how the invoice was coded. And I have these tooltips available. So it tells me the commitment amount, any change orders, the total amount, what's been paid, what's been invoiced, what's in TimberScan, and then my balance. I can see my revised contract amount, job to date billings, what's in TimberScan, and my balance. Same thing for my cost code and category and account. And I have these tooltips available to me all within TimberScan, so not just on this one screen here. They're available throughout the system. I can also view the image right from here as well. I have my invoice with annotations on it, the approval page. This is the audit trail for this particular invoice. I can see when it was received and by whom, who entered it into the system and when, who did the approval, who did the final review and when it was posted. I have access to the supporting documentation. In this case, it was a purchase order. And I can also view the check that paid the invoice. The other cool thing here is right from within this screen, I can use this email option and I can send this whole packet of information off to the vendor. So the system automatically packages it up as a PDF to the email, and then I could send the email to the vendor with a note saying, you know, please see attached documentation. This is a duplicate invoice. Go ahead and send that off. And then this email is available as part of this view notes. So this is an audit trail of everything that happened with this invoice. It really serves as a nice little collaboration tool. So any internal email exchanges or external exchanges, any comments entered about the invoice, as it goes through the approval process, when it was scanned, when it was reviewed, that all builds onto this audit trail so you can see the complete history of this particular document. Okay. Any new comments would be entered here, and then this comment would become available under the view notes. All right, so if I go ahead and finish my coding here, I know this is a duplicate, so I'm just going to append this so I can finish. I'll put in my amount. Okay. So at the top here, this was my header level information. And then underneath here, this is where I would start entering my line items. If you're using commitments within Sage, if you know the commitment number, you could just type it into this commitment box. If not, you could use your list or again, your function keys. This is going to show me any commitments open for this vendor. I'm going to go ahead and select this one here. I could select all of the line items or pick and choose line items. I'm getting my compliance warnings again. Now, when I selected that commitment, you'll see all this information automatically populated here for me, and this is coming from Sage. I can also see over here information about the commitment, total amount, what's been invoiced, what's in TimberScan, and my balance. If this invoice was going to put me over my commitment, the balance would be highlighted here in red for me. And then I can put multiple line items in here. If my workflow process was to have the project managers do the coding, I could put very minimal information in here. If my approval is going to be based on the job and go to the project manager for that job, I could just enter the job number and I could leave everything else blank. Okay. And then the system would automatically route it out to the project manager based on the job number. Okay. Now, a lot of companies do that. It doesn't have to be done that way. The workflow and the routing is very flexible. It could be based on, vendor, invoice type, GL account. You can also have multiple people in the approval process, and you can have dollar thresholds in place as well. So if your process is to send it out to project managers for approval, maybe they can approve up to a certain dollar amount, but then after that it needs to go to a superintendent or maybe the owner for a second level of approval. So you can have all of that built into your workflow rules. Some other things I can do here, I can attach supporting documents. So this is going to bring me up a list of any documents available based on the vendor and job combination that I've entered. This is what I have available here in my demo database. Okay, but you define what you want as supporting documents in the system. I have a purchase order here, and if you notice I have this keep open option, that would allow me to select the purchase order and keep it open. So if it hadn't been 100% fulfilled or completed, that purchase order can stay open, so as subsequent invoices come into the system, I could attach it to those invoices as well. I could have lien waivers, W-9s, whatever the case may be. And then I would just tick off the ones that I wanted to attach to this invoice. I could annotate the document as well, click attach, and then that's going to go ahead and have those supporting documents attached to this invoice, and they would be available here in the thumbnails to the left. Okay, I could put the invoice on hold if I wanted to send an email question to a vendor or ask somebody internally a question and I wanted to come back to this later. Like I said, I could put it on hold and then it would go into the hold queue. I can email at any point. But once I've done my data entry and I'm ready to move on, I would just go ahead and hit accept, and that's going to bring me to the next invoice in my queue. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I want to show you an example of one that was brought into the system using the OCR technology. We have this H&D supply here, so this probably looks familiar to you. This is the template that we looked at in the beginning. And you'll notice as soon as I clicked on the invoice, all of this coding was already done for me. Okay, so this defaulted based on the information I highlighted on the template. And if you do the default coding or set that up, you'll notice here the job number came in. So if you do use the identifier and set up some of those default coding rules for your line item, that will automatically default for you here as well. Right, so this can be, like I said, a pretty nice time saver. You can override any of this information as well. So if you wanted to change something, you certainly would have the option to do that at any point as well. Okay. All right, so that covers the data entry aspect. I'll just pause for a moment to see if there's any questions at this point before I move on. All right. Before I put my approval hat on, I just want to spend a few minutes covering some of the reports and inquiries that are available within the system. We have a whole host here of standard reports available. I'm not going to cover all of these, but I did want to show you the invoice status report. This is a very popular one amongst our TimberScan users. And this will show me all invoices that are in the approval process. So I can see I have 26 in total, and this is my dollar amount. And then I can drill into these. So this will show me the breakdown of the 26 invoices. In this case, they're distributed amongst 4 people. And then I can drill into any one of these individuals to get more detail. So if we take a look at Doug, for example, these are all of Doug's invoices. I can see when they were assigned to him, who they were assigned by, the vendor, the invoice, the date and description. I can see the amount. And then I can also see the image from here as well. Okay, so if I had any annotations or supporting documents attached to the invoice, those would all show up right here. I can email from this view as well. So this is a really nice management report. This gives you the ability to really kind of tighten in and hone in on that approval process. Some inquiries. If any of you have are doing T&M or cost plus work and you need to provide billing backup, okay, this is a real nice, easy way to be able to do that. I can look at what's in TimberScan as well as what's in Sage. And I can select a date range. So if you were doing a monthly billing and only wanted to look at a certain month, you could do that. I'm going to go ahead and select all here because I don't have a ton of information in my database. You could select just a certain job or range of jobs. I'm going to go ahead and look at all. And then based on my criteria, this is going to show me all of the results for my search criteria that I've selected. Okay. Now, any of these columns are sortable and searchable. But if I scroll over here, and you can see based on this status, I can see that this is not only what's in TimberScan, but see fully paid down here. So this is what's already been pushed over to Sage as well. And in some cases, I have fully paid invoices. So this is everything. And you can opt to include that or not to include that. If I scroll over, okay, these are all my invoices. I can see the log or the history on any of these. And then I can also see the image from here. And then I can create a report. I could say I just want maybe a PDF. I could include a report and images in one file. I could just have the report or just the images. I could also opt to include supporting documents or check images. And I have a number of grouping options available here as well. If I wanted to just look at maybe a certain cost code or a job, I can use those here. And then once I hit OK, the system's going to generate a report. And this is what the report would look like here. Okay, so at the top here, I have a summary of all of my invoices. And then if I scroll down, I can actually see the images all bundled together in this one PDF. Okay. Hopefully you can see that here. Okay. So that's the job cost inquiry. I also have the regular invoice inquiry. This is another inquiry that a lot of customers use very heavily. This is very powerful as well. I can look at what's in TimberScan as well as what's in Sage. I can look at a specific date range, but I'm going to go ahead and look at everything here. Now, all of these columns, like I said, are sortable and searchable, but you can also do custom searches as well. So you can narrow down and just keep sorting on any of these columns. So if I wanted to just see maybe a certain vendor, I can sort on the vendor column. And then if I wanted to narrow it down and say, okay, show me invoices for a certain vendor, but I only want to see them for a certain dollar amount. So by using these custom searches, I could say, you know, show me invoices that are less than maybe $10,000. Okay, and I can keep building on those. So I can have as many of those criteria as I want, and then I could keep going and say, okay, show me invoices for that vendor over 10,000, and I only want to see for a certain, you know, GL account. Okay, so this is a really nice tool if you have auditors in. You could pick a certain GL account, you could do a range or multiple. And very similar to what we saw for the job inquiry, you can also create a report out of this as well. So if you wanted to create just a PDF of all of the invoices for a certain GL account and send that off to the auditor to look at, you could do that from here. If you wanted to look at a vendor to see what did I pay the last time for a particular item, you could do that here as well. Okay, so this is, like I said, very powerful search inquiry. All right, any questions on that before we move on to the approvals? All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put my approval hat on. Okay, so this is the approval screen. Now this has the dashboard view here as well. and I can approve right from this dashboard. So there's really 3 ways to approve invoices. You can approve from the main dashboard. So if I wanted to come in here, maybe I know Weber's is chasing me and I just want to approve an invoice here quickly. I can click on Weber's from here, and then I have this either card view or grid view available. Okay, so the grid view, same information available, just laid out in a slightly different format. I like the card view here myself a little bit better, but I can click on the image, and then I can see, if I click on details, it tells me what coding's been done so far. I could edit it from here. I could approve from here. So just basically looking at this high-level detail on the invoice and the image, if this is enough information for me to go ahead and approve it, I could go ahead and approve. I could use this select all option if I wanted to approve everything on this screen. Okay. Now this is permissions based. If you didn't want folks to have access to this, like I said, you could exclude permission so they wouldn't even see this option here. And once I hit approve, like I said, that's going to go ahead and move them to the next phase in the workflow. That's one option. Another option is using the mobile application. Okay, now I'm just going to ask, can everyone see my screen here? Let me make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Primary invoices.
Perfect. All right. So if I'm a project manager and I'm logging in here to approve my invoices, I'm going to see them in this card view. Okay? And then I can click on a specific invoice. Okay? And I can use my control buttons up here to make it larger. I would have my supporting documents as thumbnails over on the left here. I have a number of annotations available to me. I can do freehand. I can put text on here. I have rubber stamps available. I could add pages at this point as well. Over here, this would be my header level information for this particular invoice. And then across the top here, these are the actions that I have available. I could put it on hold from here. I could route it from here. I could go ahead and reject it. And if I reject, I do have to put a reason as to why I'm rejecting it. I could add a note, and I can view my note history. I could go ahead and approve it, and I can access my distributions from in here. I could add a new distribution, or I could change an existing distribution if I have access to do so. Okay, so this will give me a drop down into my Sage system. So if I want to change the coding there, I could. Now, this is accessible using the internet, okay? So you just need a browser to be able to access this. And it's what we call a responsive user interface. So the system will automatically resize based on the device that I'm on. Okay? So this is a simulator, so you can see what it would look like. In this example, this is a Galaxy S5. If you were using an iPad, okay, this is what it would look like. And this is the horizontal view, and then I can make this larger as well. Okay, so the features and functionality available is the same. It's just the look and feel and the layout is a bit different based on the device that you're on. So if we go back to, say, the iPhone, you'll see up here, you know, I can access my distributions and my header and that from this toggle button, or I can access from down here as well. Okay. All right, so that's the mobile access. Okay. Now, if we go back to the main view, I can use the standard menu to go ahead and do my approvals. Okay, and the system's telling me I have 9 invoices to approve. And then I can narrow down the search from here. So if I know I only have a few minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes to look at approvals, and then I need to move on to something else, I can come in here and narrow down the list. I could look at invoices for a specific job, or maybe just for a certain vendor, by date. I'll go ahead and look at my power equipment rentals. And then I'm only going to see the invoices based on what I've selected. Okay. Now, as an approver, if my job is to come in and actually complete the coding, I would go ahead and do that in here. If I'm just reviewing, I would go ahead and verify that everything looks okay. But in this example, if I need to code, I can use my list button or my function keys. Let me go ahead and select that cost code and then put in an amount. Now, as soon as I entered that amount, the system told me that I exceeded my tolerance for this particular category. Right from here, if I want to go investigate a little further before I approve this invoice, I can go ahead and hit the job button up here. This is going to bring me to that job inquiry. And this is showing me all invoices for this particular project. And then I can scroll over. I can see I have just under $500,000 in total in invoices. And then if I want to drill in further at the category or the cost code level or of any of these columns, I can go ahead and just drag and drop any of these. So now I'm only seeing invoices broken down by cost code. I have 22, for example, for this code, and then I can drill into this. And then I would see I have just over 63,000 for this particular code. Okay, so this is just a nice tool to be able to get a financial snapshot of your project, and then helps me decide what I need to do with this invoice. Okay. I could put it on hold in AP from here. So this would allow me to approve it, but when it goes over to Sage, it would be on hold in accounts payable, so the invoice wouldn't be able to be selected for payment until somebody in AP released the hold. I could attach supporting documents at this phase. I could reject. Okay. But once I'm happy with the coding and everything has been done, I would just go ahead and hit approve. And then that's going to move it on to the next phase in the workflow. So once I've made it through the workflow, and if I'm using the final review process, okay, this is what the final review would look like. I would click on this button. The look and feel is exactly the same. So we tried to keep it very consistent throughout the application. Okay, so this is the final review screen. Very similar to the others, with the exception, if you'll notice down here, instead of saying, you know, approve, it says queue for export. So as a final approver, I would come in here, verify my coding, everything looks okay, supporting documentation requirements have been met. If all looks good, I would go ahead and queue for export.
Hey, Allison. I think we may be seeing a frozen screen.
See here.
There we go.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the look and feel, like I said, is very similar to the other screens. The difference here is this queue for export button. Okay. So as a final review or approver, you would go ahead and queue for export, and then this is going to move that invoice to the export queue. Now, once it goes over into Sage, share this screen here. Okay, once it goes over into Sage and you pay the invoice, okay, we have a process to attach the check to the invoice. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. But the end result, once that check gets attached, I'll set my power equipment rentals, and then you can see the paperclip is highlighted here. Right from within your Sage system, you can see the entire packet of information. So you can see the invoice, the approval page, okay, the supporting documents, in this case a purchase order, as well as the check. Now, how I got that check in there is this checks button. Now, if you're printing checks to check stock, then you would, once your checks have been printed, you would go ahead and reacquire those into TimberScan. And then you would use this attach checks function. And then you would just select your batch and your account number and a starting check number. And the system's going to go ahead and attach an image of this check to any of the invoices that it paid. So if this check paid multiple invoices, it's going to attach this check to all of those invoice records. If you're using like Create a Check or Print Boss, then you wouldn't have to reacquire those check images into the system. You would use this auto attach checks, and we're just going out and looking at the file that was created by Create a Check or Print Boss, and we'll look to that file and automatically attach the check image to the invoices. Okay. All right, one quick thing here, and then I'll open it up for questions. Everything that I've covered so far has been relating to the accounts payable approval process. But as I mentioned at the onset, we also have this complete enterprise content management system. We call that AIM, which is Advanced Image Management. And this will allow you to store and manage your other content for your company. Process is very similar to the AP side. You acquire documents, okay, so you can drag and drop them. You're going to select your data entry group, and then Process is going to bring them into the system. For your data entry, you do need to set up document categories and document types. So in this case, if we say project management would be our category and the document type, these are examples that I have in my system, but you think of this as the files within your file cabinet drawer. Okay, so I'll select drawings, and the document type drives your indexing, and you set that up as part of the implementation process with your consultant. Okay, and then this is what becomes your search criteria later. You can build workflows around any of these documents. Okay, you can route them, you can do emails from here, very similar to the AP side. And then we have this search engine that sits on top of that entire repository of everything you're storing and managing, and you can do searches. Okay? So I could say, show me in my project management category, show me all my drawings. Okay, and then I can view the image from here. I could add a note, view existing notes, see any workflows that are associated. And then I can just keep building conditions on here. So if I wanted to say, just show me drawings where my job is, you know, equal to a specific project, it's going to narrow down the results even further for me. And you can save these searches and just access them via this drop down as well. Okay. All right, I know we're coming close to the top of the hour here, so I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions. Okay. Leilani, did you take everyone off of mute, or were there any questions in the chat?
No questions in the chat. And we don't have any hands raised.
Okay. All right, I'll give it a few minutes then if anybody, like I said, has anything that they can think of or wants to see anything in a little bit more detail. I know I went pretty quickly there at the end, but I wanted to make sure that I got to touch on everything.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, then we can go ahead and wrap up a couple of minutes early, but I want to thank everyone for their time. And certainly if there's any follow-up questions that you think of later, you know, please just reach out to Leilani and she can circle back with me and we can make sure we get you answers to any questions that you might have.
Thanks so much. Everyone have a great day.
Okay, thank you, everyone.